In this lesson, we'll figure out how to make custom geometry float and react to a turbulent fluid. So I'm opening up this scene here where I'm starting with this boat geometry. And what I want to do is to create sort of a turbulent ocean that my boat can float around in and react to the actual turbulence in the water. And to start off with, I'm going to come back to my Particle Fluids tab, which is the fifth one over here. And I want to create a flip tank, and I want to create it dead in the middle of my scene, so I'm going to hold down Control and click the Flip Tank Shelf tool. Now, I need my flip tank to be large enough to encapsulate the boat. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to look down from the top view, which you can use spacebar and the number 2 key on your keyboard, or you can use this drop down, Set View, and Top Viewport. This will give me an idea about how big I need my flip tank to be. So I'm going to go ahead and size it up, give myself just a little bit of extra padding here so that I know I've got some room for my boat to float around. I'll give him a little, well there. Now I can go back to my perspective view and check it out, make sure that I've given my boat enough fluid to float around in. I'll center it up. Okay, that looks good for now. Let me make it just a little bit wider. And we can change that. We can always go back and modify that at any time if we need. Now, one thing that'll make my simulation just a little more efficient is probably if I didn't have as much depth. Since I'm only going to be looking at the surface, I don't really need all of that much depth. So to do this, I want to look at this from the side or the front. Again, I used spacebar and the number 3, but you can set that view by coming to this drop down and using Set View and Front Viewport, which you can also see here has the number 3 by it, giving you the hint that you can use the spacebar and 3 key to set that view. So I don't want my water too shallow, since here's the bottom of my boat. Let's go ahead and bring it down so that we have a little bit more surface here, but we just barely take in the bottom of the boat. And we can bring our surface around. I'm just sort of rearranging the box there, and that looks about good, just so we've got room for our boat to float. Now, we need sort of a turbulent ocean so that we can actually see the effect on our boat. Let's set that up first. We'll come back out into the auto dop that was created for us, which is right here. We'll dive inside, and we see that we have our typical flip object here, and we have our flip solver, which means that we can use our particle tools. Well, to create that turbulent ocean, I'm going to use a pop wind. Now you can hit Tab or Backspace or right-click anywhere in the blank spot of the viewport and choose Tool Menu. I'll come down to the Pops list, and now Pops Wind is going to be, I think, just outside of your screen. It's down here on the far right-hand column at the very bottom. Now remember, you can also just hit Tab and do POPW, which will sort out all of the nodes that you have offered to you, and choose Pop Wind that way. Either way, however you get the node. And we'll plug it into that first purple input there, which is particle velocity. Now if we rewind and click play right here, we don't get much of a result. It's because we haven't actually turned on our turbulence. So let's come over here and actually look at what we have in our pop wind to play with. We'll stop our timeline, rewind. I want to ensure that I have real-time playback turned on. So we'll look at our pop wind and see that we have 0 amplitude. Well, we actually need to have a little bit more amplitude than that. I'm going to try something like 0.75 just to see where that gets us. And I know that my swirl size is typically, when we've been messing with that parameter, it's been for sort of small simulations. We've used numbers that are around 1 or a little under 1. I'm going to go ahead and crank this up to somewhere like 4 and see what we get. Let's rewind, click play, and we can see that we do have some initial movement inside of our flip tank. Our fluid is sort of swirling around, and I believe that it will influence our boat quite well, just like this to start with. So the question is, how do I get the boat to actually float around in the water? Well, the way that you do it is you use the Embed in Fluids tool, which is actually located in a different part of the interface. It's over here in a tab called Container Tools. And the reason it's called Container Tools is because these tools are used whenever you're working with voxel grids or volume containers. Now, we learned about Flip early on, and we learned that Flip does use those volume tools. So this will allow us to actually take advantage of that for the first time. So let's go ahead and click on our boat, make sure that we have our boat selected, which is way over here in the network. If you didn't want to have to zoom out and search for that, there's a couple of things you can do. You can always use L on your keyboard. That will lay out all of your nodes so they fit within the viewport. So there's that. You can also turn on this little guy here, which is the third icon over in the top part of the network view. And this is basically just an overview, and it will let you know if you have any nodes that are outside of your range. You can easily see that even though we're just seeing the fluid tank, that we actually have some more stuff that's outside of our view, so we can sort of get this helicopter bird's eye view level of what our nodes look like. I'm going to turn that off for now, though. And all we need to do is tap L. That'll lay out our nodes. We'll select the boat itself and go ahead and click on this icon, which looks like a little buoy floating in the water. And what it's called is Embed in Fluid. So let's go ahead and click on that. And we notice we get this prompt that says, select the fluid or fluid box to embed into. So since I want this fluid, I'm going to go ahead and just select it here in the viewport. And then I'm going to tap Enter to complete. So here it says, press Enter to complete. I hit accept, or click Enter, and it accepts that. And now my boat is actually embedded in the fluid. So let's see what that looks like. Wow, I can see my boat is starting to move, but it doesn't quite look the way that I want it to. In fact, it looks kind of like a Salvador Dali painting if you really think about it. So what's happening here? Well, what's happening to the boat is that what's been embedded in the fluid is not necessarily the boat geometry. What's been embedded are the points of the boat geometry. So if we look at just the boat here, now I'm going to turn off here on the top part of your viewport is a little drop down where you can choose to show all objects, ghost other objects, or hide other objects. And all this does is sort of let you isolate your view to exactly what you're looking at. I'm going to choose hide other objects. So what we can see here now is just the boat. And what that means is I'm only going to see what's beneath the layer I'm on. So now I'm at object level, I see everything. If I jump into the boat, all I'm going to see is the boat. The other objects have been hidden, and that's because we changed this here to hide other objects. But I want to focus on the boat for right now. So let's go back and look at the initial boat geometry. And I'm going to use this little icon here on the far right-hand side of the viewport to turn on my points. So if we look at this, we can see that what's actually been embedded in the fluid are these individual points all over our geometry. Well, what that means is that the fluid is going to affect those as individual points. So if I just click play, you can now see that the velocity of the fluid is just pushing around these points as they float around independently. Well, really what we want is less of a mesh effect. What we've got now is kind of like the idea of throwing a fishing net out on the water. Each one of the individual cross points where the net has been knotted is floating around independently of the other ones. What we really want is something more like if we threw, say, a wooden box out onto the water where it would operate as one single piece of geometry instead of all of the individual points. So really when we think about it, what we need is one point floating in the water. We only need one point to control the position, rotation, and movement of the boat. Well, that's easy enough to accomplish. We'll rewind our timeline and look and see what all's changed here. Well, we have our file, which is the boat that's been brought in here. We can see that here, boat.geo. And then we've got our DOP import node, and we'll make our parameters just a little bit more visible here. Our DOP import node is bringing in the object AutoDOP network boat. Okay, let's go over and look back at our AutoDOP network and see what's happening. Well, again, we've got a little bit of a mess here. So how do we fix that? Well, we tap L on the keyboard, which I'll do now, and that'll lay out our nodes for us. So let's look at this new structure. Well, these things here we've seen before. This is our flip tank and our pop wind. The new nodes that we've been given here affect the boat as an object, some piece of SOP geometry, There's a fetch data, a gas advect, and a gas velocity stretch, and a multi-solver, and all of these things here on the right. Well, we don't really need to worry about what each and every one of these nodes do and what all of their parameters are. That would be a little bit overkill for this course. What we do need to focus on is simply the fact that the boat has all of its points floating in the water. And we can see that here if we click on this one single node, this SOP Geo or SOP Geometry. And all that means is that, yes, we're pulling in a piece of geometry from the outside world. So outside of DOPS, I need to go and fetch the thing that's at the end of boat dop import 1. Okay. Right now, the thing that's at the end of boat dop import 1, if we look, is the entire boat and all of its points. What if we could just add a single point and then attach the boat to that point? We can. And that's what we're going to start in the next lesson.